You might recognize this plant by its colorful flowers. This is a lantana, and it's known for being a hardy, fast-growing perennial. Looks pretty harmless, right? Well, think again. The Australian government has labeled this little shrub right here as a weed of national significance. It was introduced to the Australian continent in around 1841 by European settlers, and by the early 20th century, it had grown out of control, choking rainforest growth and producing berries and leaves toxic to local wildlife. One guy from London traveling with a pretty plant probably didn't foresee that it would one day cover more than 12 million acres across the East Coast. But that's the thing. When we explore new environments, even the tiniest actions can have massive consequences. So, what does that mean for human space exploration? And how do we push onward and upward without accidentally covering Mars and Lantana? Hi, I'm Sarah Smay, and this is Space for Humans. To learn more about ethical exploration and legal regulations in space, we spoke with our special guest, Melissa Zwart. Melissa is a professor of law and the deputy director and chief investigator in the ARC Center of Excellence in Plants for Space.
So when we go to space, we need to go there with the mindset that space belongs to everybody, and we need to make sure that we conduct activities in a way that make it possible for space to continue to be accessible for all sorts of exciting scientific, commercial, civil missions where we learn more about our solar system and beyond. So the principles that we need to embrace are making sure that space is safe, sustainable, and that we have sort of access to all of these areas in a way that they're not damaged in a way which will prevent us using them.
Melissa puts those principles into action in her work with the Plants for Space program, which is researching new ways plants can support long-term, sustainable living in space. They've had a lot of success with an aquatic plant called duckweed. Check out the episode where we made blueberry duckweed muffins to learn more. So, what are the ethical implications of taking plants from Earth into space?
So when humans first went to the moon, we were worried about bringing contamination back from the moon, and we were worried also about contaminating the moon's surface. We know now that there's not a lot of life on the moon. We don't have to worry about bringing things back. On Mars, we know that there is likely to be signs of the origins of life. So when we go somewhere, as humans, we can't put ourselves into an autoclave. We're not sterile completely. So when we go somewhere, we'll be worried about contaminating those early signs of life that might be there. So growing plants, interacting with plants, we have to be careful about the fact that we don't engage in what we call forwards contamination of space, which might disrupt things like the signs of life.
Mars is one of 8 planets in our solar system with an atmosphere where we might hope to find signs of life. But if we explore these environments carelessly, we could miss out on incredible discoveries. And that's where international space law comes in.
I often hear space described as a Wild West, a place that has no laws, but I actually think it's really important that we recognise that we actually have a lot of international law and a lot of domestic law that tells us how we can act responsibly in space. So as the space industry expands, we need to make sure that we continue to abide by the very important international space law regime that has been in place since the 1960s. The international space law treaties have been very effective at keeping peace in space and regulating the way in which states and commercial operators go into space and conduct their activities.
And that's why Australia needed a space agency. You see, Australia had been a member of the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space since the late 1950s. But it wasn't until 2018 that they founded their own agency.
So under international space law, states are given the responsibility to authorise and continually supervise the activities of its own domestic space actors. So in Australia, that responsibility is given to the Australian Space Agency, which oversees the implementation of things like our launch regulations. So the Australian Space Agency will ensure that launch providers are acting in a way that is safe and responsible and complies with our international obligations as a space actor.
Of course, that wasn't the only reason Australia needed a space agency, right, Melissa?
Oh, and the most important important reason is that New Zealand got one before us, and we can't let that happen.
Space agencies across the world help support responsible exploration and research in space, balancing the goals of innovation and discovery. After all, we don't want duckweed to become the first weed of Martian significance. Arnar! Thanks to Melissa Zwart for joining us, and thank you for watching. Please take a moment to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Space for Humans. Lantana. Okay. Arnar! I'm so sorry.